Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, Terry, the results are in. Who are the happiest people on earth?
I have no idea. Us?
We're number 18.
We're number 18.
We're after Germany and Belgium.
Wow.
Number 1, Finland.
Wow. And why are they the happiest?
Well, you know, they have what they call family saunas. When businesses have meetings, I'm serious, they all go to the sauna. They're all naked. They're sitting there, the boss and the secretaries and everybody, they're all sitting there. I'm serious.
I'm putting an addition on the house right away. That's all I have to say.
I mean, you know, you take away all your inhibitions.
Yeah, well, there'd be a lot to take away, can I just say? Yeah. That's a boatload.
I asked someone, I said, you know, aren't you a little embarrassed? I said, oh, no, it's perfectly natural. But, I mean, they have business meetings in the sauna.
Yeah.
Boss naked, girls.
Okay, can I just say, don't even think about it. It's just not on the docket.
Why are the Finns happy? All right. We've got all these hang-ups. They don't have them. All right. The next thing I want to point out is that, amazingly, Tucker Carlson has now got the #1 rating in cable, followed by another Fox show. And then they go back and forth between MSNBC and Fox. Back and forth. The ratings,
Well, there's great division in the country. Maybe that reflects that.
It's extreme left or extreme right, and there's nothing in the middle that really has. So these two networks have the big audience. But Tucker Carlson is now #1. And Sean Hannity's #2, and then it goes down the list. But the 5 comes in, and then Rachel Maddow. I mean, it's amazing. Okay, well, so much for the a little bit of nothing. Well, the serious story is there's a tragedy developing in the Midwest. It breaks your heart because farmers can't plant; they're going bankrupt, and the flooding in the Midwest could reach historic levels. 74 counties in Nebraska have issued a declaration of emergency, and Iowa's governor is warning people the disaster is far from over. Let's go to John Jessup, who's got a closer look with more pictures of what's happening.
Pat, as you said, heartbreaking indeed. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds warned this week that her state is just getting started in dealing with the massive flooding that hit the state. The waters devastated many areas. At least 4 people are dead, and hurting farmers badly, losing livestock and grain. Others lost valuable possessions.
I lost my dad's Bible. You can't replace that stuff.
And the worst may not be over, with the threat of levees possibly breaking. And Governor Reynolds warned spring rains and melting snow could lead to more flooding in the days and even weeks ahead. Well, turning to health news, kale is one of the healthiest vegetables you can eat, but a new report warns it's also one of the most pesticide-contaminated vegetables. That report comes from the Environmental Working Group, which publishes an annual list of what it calls the Dirty Dozen. It ranks 12 items with the highest levels of pesticide residues. Here's their list for 2012. #1, strawberries; 2, spinach; 3, kale; then nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches; #8, cherries; 9, pears; tomatoes is #10, celery; and topping the list at 12, potatoes. Despite the concerns, the group adds the health benefits of a diet rich in fruits and vegetables, Pat, outweigh the risks of pesticide exposure.
Well, I totally agree, but this stuff called Roundup has got glyphosate in it. A jury has just found that this carcinogenic. They went after the oatmeal company. I'm a great fan of the whole oatmeal that you cook for a while. That had a high level of the glyphosate. And what's happened is, in order to get the weeds out of their farms, farmers have sprayed with what's called Roundup. Roundup was made by Monsanto, which in turn had been bought by Bayer. Bayer thought they had a good deal with that Monsanto. Turns out they're on the hook for huge damages. And if the jury just ruled yesterday that Roundup is carcinogenic. Now, if that's the case, we just don't know how extensive this is. And they talk about kale, but there's so many different vegetables and fruits that we think are so important. And if they are spraying Roundup on these plants, it's devastating.
Well, aren't there alternatives to that? Because when this Roundup thing's been pending for a long time, I was talking with someone about it the other day. There is a solution you can make with vinegar and salt and some other ingredient.
Who makes vinegar and salt with
Well, who made Roundup before they started that and made a profit? I mean, you know, somebody get on that fast.
I mean, can you imagine soaking your oatmeal in vinegar and salt? I mean,
well, you're not, but that washes off. It's natural, you know. It's not a chemical. It doesn't have what you're talking about.
Oh, no, they're suing Quaker Oats because of the oatmeal. I'm serious.
Because it contains it. Yeah, but what I'm saying is
it's carcinogenic.
Right.
The oats have got high levels of...
How could anything not have... I mean, when you talk about spraying
anything, they've got to stop using Roundup. I mean, they're spraying weeds in the field with this herbicide to kill the plants.
But if they stop using Roundup, if they don't find something natural, won't they just find another chemical?
Well, they can get a plow out there and run the weeds into the ground. That's what the old way. We used to have a hoe. You get a hoe out there, and then you'd have a mule or tractor or whatever to plow your... It's so much cheaper just go spray.
Of course.
And, well, anyhow. But, ladies and gentlemen, that's what's happening. Now, let's look now at what's going in the Middle East. Iran is a bad actor. The Iranian Guard, we are now trying to name the Guard of Iran as a terrorist group. And this has never before happened, that essentially an army of a country has been named a terrorist force. Now, will the countries of the Middle East come together with the United States to condemn Iran for what it's doing? We have our reporter with Mike Pompeo, and John has a report about that trip over to the Middle East.
That's right, Pat. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem Wednesday, discussing the threat from Iran. It was part of Pompeo's trip throughout the Middle East as he tries to build alliances to stand against Iran. And CBN's David Brody is traveling with Pompeo and brings us a story from Jerusalem.
As he boarded his plane for the Middle East this week, Secretary Pompeo had a long ride and a full plate. We were on board to hear his extensive agenda. One item looms very large. Some might call it impossible, but it's a mission he chose to accept. Find a way to halt Iran's growing power in this volatile region. As CBN News has been reporting for years, Israel is Iran's main target. And that conversation was a major part of the discussion between Secretary Pompeo and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
The United States and Israel are working in close coordination to roll back Iranian aggression in the region and around the world. Secretary and I just spent the first part of our meetings discussing exactly how to do that. And I think there are ways that will intensify the pressure even more.
Pompeo's visit comes just a few weeks before Israel's big election. The visit is seen by some as a way for the Trump administration to boost Netanyahu's prospects. But politics aside, the hawkish Pompeo and the conservative Netanyahu have a strong bond, just like the two countries. The secretary got a first-hand look at the new American embassy in Jerusalem, a move by President Trump that has garnered wide support here. Pompeo's Israel stop also included meetings with Israeli and Mediterranean leaders from Greece and Cyprus as they try to push new energy sources that will make them stronger and Iran weaker. Ultimately, all roads lead back to stopping Iranian influence. Recently, Israel's also been cracking down on efforts by the Iranian-backed terrorist group Hezbollah to attack the Jewish state from the neighboring Golan Heights. And Netanyahu says that shows why Israel's presence is so important in that strategically key location.
All of you can imagine what would have happened if Israel were not in the Golan. We would have Iran on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. I think for this reason and for many more, I think it's time that the international community recognize Israel's stay in the Golan, the fact that the Golan will always remain part of the state of Israel.
Pompeo didn't announce any new change in U.S. policy on Israel's presence in the Golan, but he did make clear his love for this country.
I'm proud to be here again, not only as America's top diplomat, but also as a man of faith that is always newly inspired when I get the chance to travel to Israel.
Iran is not just a threat to Israel, but to stability through the Middle East. After Israel, Pompeo heads to Lebanon, where he'll make clear that Hezbollah's influence inside Lebanese politics is a major risk to peace in the area. He also made a visit to friendlier territory. The Secretary of State began his trip to the Middle East here in Kuwait, getting the royal treatment for sure. Kuwait's a small country, roughly the size of New Jersey, but a very important one. It represents a bloc of nations of Sunni Muslim countries hoping to stay together, stick together, to prevent Iran from gaining a stronghold of influence here in the region. Kuwait is unique because it has relationships with both the U.S. and Iran. Pompeo needs Kuwait's help to make sure the economic sanctions against Iran are holding up and not being evaded.
The United States is seeking vigorous new efforts from all countries in the region to address the security challenges of our time. These challenges include defeating terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda for sure. Kuwait is a strong partner towards that goal.
It's all a work in progress in a part of the world where progress, if any, moves at a snail's pace. David Brody, CBN News, traveling with the Secretary of State in Jerusalem.
Thanks, David. Well, the crisis in Venezuela shows no signs of letting up. Constant power outages, food shortages, and roving criminal gangs are driving more to leave every day. More than 10% of all Venezuelans have now fled to other countries, and one border town in the neighboring country of Colombia is struggling to keep pace with a flood of desperate people. But CBN's Operation Blessing is on the scene to help those in need. Chuck Holton brings us that story.
Hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans have come streaming across this border trying to escape the third world conditions inside their own country. So many have come out in the last few weeks that the border area outside Cúcuta, Colombia is sheer chaos. With Venezuelan currency all but worthless, people do whatever they can to get enough to survive, selling candy, coffee, and even their own hair. Crime, prostitution, and drug use are rampant, and after dark, these filthy streets become a giant open-air sleeping area for hundreds of families, including many small children, because they simply have nowhere else to go. It's a hard life to be sure, but for so many, even this is better than what they left behind. 17-year-old Wendy came here a month ago from Valencia, Venezuela, where 2 weeks' salary was just about enough to buy this 1-pound bag of flour. But after sleeping on the ground and being unable to sell enough to get by, she's starting to have second thoughts.
Well, I have been here for 1 month. I left because of the situation in Venezuela, because of Maduro. But here it is very difficult. Staying here, sleeping on the street, perhaps it would be better back there because I have a family, help, and a bed. And here I am suffering by sleeping on the street.
It doesn't take long for most who cross here to realize staying in Cúcuta is unsustainable, since the city's now said to hold more Venezuelans than Colombians. So thousands of Venezuelan refugees are picking up and walking the highway south, carrying little more than hope in their bags. So they say if you want to understand somebody, you have to walk a mile in their shoes. That's why I'm out here on this busy highway with this family that's walking from Cúcuta, Colombia, all the way to Bogota. And it's very dangerous, as you can see. There's lots of these big trucks going by. They've got their little kids with them. And the problem with walking a mile in somebody's shoes is that so many of these people don't have any shoes. And that's where Operation Blessing comes in.
Most of the migrants from Venezuela are walking uphill for several hours in really bad conditions to reach Pamplona first and then go to Bucaramanga or other big cities, bigger cities than Cúcuta.
Operation Blessing has been providing shoes and socks to those who need them along the trail. But more than that, along with local Christian organizations, they've been sharing the love of Christ in other ways.
Today we're planning to have a medical brigade here on the way to Pamplona. Also, Operation Blessing is bringing some water solutions, so we're going to be setting up a water station, clean water station for the migrants. So even when we are not here, they're going to be able to just walk by, open the faucet, refill their bottles, and it's going to be safe water for them.
Unlike the migrant caravans traveling out of Honduras last November, very few of these Venezuelans say they plan to go to the United States. Another difference is that the majority we spoke to said they'd be happy to turn around and go back home, just as soon as Nicolas Maduro and his regime are no longer in power. In the meantime, Operation Blessing will be here to help these weary travelers keep walking toward a better life. 12 days walk north of Bogota, Colombia. I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Pat, some incredibly sad and desperate scenes there in Chuck's report.
Heartbreaking. You know, Bogota is up pretty high in the air. I mean, it's 6,000 or 7,000 feet, as I recall. I mean, I've been to Bogota a number of times, and it's high up in the mountains. So if they've got to go from near sea level all the way up, they're climbing up a big mountain. And we're there with Operation Blessing to help them, especially clean water. They need shoes. They need medical attention. They need vitamins for children. They need, obviously, safe water solutions. They need solar lights, which we have. And we're there. Operation Blessing, our disaster relief fund. So if you want to help where there's a real crisis, just pick up the phone, call in right now, and say, look, you can count on me. It's Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. And Lord willing, all of the money you pledge will go to that cause. 1-800-700-7000. So something else I think you'll find interesting, I understand that Maduro is losing the support of the barrios, of the poor people in Venezuela. They had been sort of the backbone of his support for many years. And now they're turning against him because they can't stand the life there any longer. It's not just the wealthy who are hurting, not just the business class, but the very poor people are suffering dreadfully under Maduro. They don't have medicine, they don't have lights, they don't have adequate food, they lack clean water. I mean, go up and down the line. And that country is in absolute chaos. Now, he's lost them. So the question is, you say, well, how come the army doesn't turn? The army is run by the Cubans. The Cubans don't care. And then they, in turn, are backed up by the Chinese and the Russians, because the Chinese and the Russians would love to see a cancer growing on the underside of America. So, in my opinion, as I've said over and over again, there's got to be a military solution. You can't allow this humanitarian crisis to continue to fester. And so, but the countries of Latin America are reluctant to do anything militarily. But I think something's got to be done. And we have the facility to do something more than what we're doing. I mean, but we put on sanctions. The distillate that's needed to purify that Venezuelan crude, we're limiting supplies of that so they can't refine their crude. Their output has been cut at least in half or more. I was reading yesterday that a lot of the technicians who work in the oil industry have left the country. They've gone to the Middle East, they've gone to Canada, they've gone to the United States. And so even if the Maduro regime falls, it'll take several years to get the infrastructure back up in that oil industry. That's what socialism will do, folks. It's terrible. Don't listen to the siren song of those who think, let's go socialist. No way. That's where it'll end, is disaster.